Hey everyone, David here with your weekly Mouthful of David video. Like usual, we'll start with the updates. So, our second part of the two-parter that we did about Vladimir Lenin and the Russian Revolution is out now, so you can listen to that on any podcast app that you use. Soon we'll be dropping our two-parter about boxing heavyweight champions, and so in that one we just talk about like what's sociologically and historically interesting about the boxers that we chose and kind of relate them to their eras in history rather than just talking about their individual biographies. So be on the lookout for that. And after that, we'll do another movie episode and then we will go from there. So, anyway, for this week's episode, it was brought to my attention that today is International Podcast Day, which I'm not quite sure that we really need a holiday for podcasters. But if it's going to be a thing and if it's going to exist, I figured I would just use this chance to thank all of you for listening. I can't speak for Nick or Cameron, but for me personally, I just really appreciate being able to talk about history and talk about it in a way that we want, in a way that we find interesting. For me, I really like to engage with like questions and difficult themes that I find just interesting and engaging, and it's really nice to know that there are people out there who kind of feel the same way, and find what we do kind of worthwhile in a way. So, thanks to all of you who listen, whether you listen to these videos, to our podcasts, if you're following us on social media, just thank you. And for that reason, I figured it would be nice if, in the midst of just everything that's going on right now, it'd be nice to talk about why it's good to have hope and why it's actually kind of reasonable to. I mean, we are dealing with a lot right now. The political landscape sucks. We are dealing with COVID, obviously, with a pandemic. We are dealing with climate change, economic catastrophe, and if you're a person of color, specifically Black or Latino, and even more specifically also low income, you are dealing with being over policed. It's a lot. It's a lot. But there are things to find hope in and places to feel comfort. And so, one of the first things I wanted to talk about as a reason to have hope, it's very cheesy and foundational, but I'm going to build off of it. So please don't cringe when I say it, or cringe and just hear what I have to say after. But, everyday acts of kindness that you see from people. And again, very cheesy, very Hallmark, and it's not enough to undo everything by itself. But what everyday acts of kindness, I think, do show is that, people, generally speaking, not everyone obviously, but a lot of people to some extent do want to help each other, but they just don't know how to. And a lot of the time, they're also so distracted with their own lives and trying to get by and just kind of keep their heads above water that they don't always know how. But, sometimes you just think about how everyday acts of kindness do show that, some people do want to be better and do care, and they just don't know how to translate that into something bigger and something better. But it's still better than nothing to, help out people in whatever everyday way that you can. But going off of that, we have seen over the last few years, the rebirth of the labor movement, which is really huge. And then, of course, on top of that, we've also seen things like the Black Lives Matter movement. We've seen tenant unions begin to form. We saw the Standing Rock protests a few years back in 2016. And a lot of people look at how those things didn't immediately end up in it with victories, or as many victories as we would have liked. Whether that was, really wanting the Standing Rock protest to succeed, which, most of us hopefully did. Whether it means like drastically overhauling what policing looks like, or even, having Bernie Sanders become the Democratic nominee earlier this year. And, some of those losses are bummers and they suck. But one thing about, teaching the civil rights movement and a bunch of other movements of various times from this country's history or any other countries is that you see that a lot of the time these things take place over a pretty long series of years, even decades. You could even, looking at the civil rights movement as an example, define that as a period from 1945 to like the early to mid 70s. And so it's unfortunate we haven't gotten every victory that we want in the last couple years, but that is not a reason to lose hope. And in fact, a lot of the things that have been accomplished throughout the last few years can very much be seen, I think, as seeds to something better to come along in the next few years. As long as we continue to, work toward those goals, of course, nothing's going to come magically by itself. We have to help ourselves and each other. But if we don't give up and we keep going along this path, it's pretty fair to expect that something positive will come of it. Again, I'm not saying every problem is going to be solved or anything like that. But, just don't think that because in the last few years that we've met some defeats that everything is hopeless, because again, no historical movement has ever achieved something in a very short period of time. It takes a lot. And kind of related to that is also the fact that we don't know what's going to happen in the near future or the intermediate future or anything like that. I mean, really try saying that you for sure could have seen the George Floyd protests happening exactly as they did. I'm sure there's going to be some people who, those people who love to be right all the time, who are like, oh yeah, of course I saw that happening. But happening is exactly as it did and in exactly the same way. I don't think most of us could have foreseen that coming. And these protests, they unfortunately haven't brought a lot of their demands for change on the national level, but if you've been paying attention to the local politics in these places, some pretty cool stuff is happening. Some pretty cool reforms are being implemented. So, just know that for all we know, a month from now, something drastic could happen that really shakes things up in our favor. But of course, you can't count on that. You can't count on things happening to go your way, but just know that it is always a possibility. But in the meantime, do what you can to help each other, do what you can to support what you believe in, and, just do your best to keep humming along. Again, looking at history as evidence, it is not unreasonable to expect fruits of the seeds that we're planting now to be harvested in a way that helps us down the line. What exactly will happen, I can't say. No one else really can. But, if we keep plugging away, we can get to somewhere better than this. So thanks for listening, everyone. Again, sincerely, just really appreciate all of you. Thank you for listening. Stay safe out there and catch you next week.